Hi, I'm Jim Vanderscaff. Welcome to my shop, downeastwoodart.com. And what we're going to talk to you about today is making dovetails by hand. There are essentially two different methods of making dovetails. One is by hand, and I'm going to demonstrate a very unique method today that has a tweak that was created by Rob Cosman, a Canadian woodworker who has done this very well and done this for an awful long time. I'm also using some of his equipment. I'll put some links to the equipment in the notes below. But the other method of cutting dovetails is to use a template like this. They come in all sorts of different forms, but basically what you're doing is you have a router and you've got the work pieces mounted on here. They're mounted in this location. Then this device is put on top of a router table. You move it back and forth and you make the cuts. And you do it on both sides and you get something that looks like this. These are dovetails that were cut with that template system. I've done this for a while, and I've also realized that I like hand-cut dovetails much better. They look like this. You can see the different level of attractiveness between these obviously hand-cut dovetails and machine-cut dovetails. They're just very different. You can do them in all kinds of contrasting woods. As you can see here, all of these were hand-cut. This happens to be just some pine and some cherry. This happens to be tiger maple and walnut. So what are the elements of a dovetail? This is the pin board, and the pin board, these are the pins that are shown here. Then is the tail board, and the tails are these pieces here. They look like a dove's tail, and that's why it's called a tail board. Okay, so what equipment do you need to make dovetails? Well, a dovetail saw, a marking knife, dividers, a couple of different squares, chisels, and what's called a fret saw, also marking pens and things like that, and a dovetail marker and something to whomp on the chisels with. Okay, so one doesn't start off with one simple lesson and learn how to make dovetails. It takes practice. And one of the things that you want to practice is how to cut straight, how to cut to a line. And you learn that by attempting to do it. So what I have here is a board that has various marks on it. When I put the board in the vise, I always like to get it square, because then when I make my cuts, it's always to a reference that's square. And then I'll show you what I do to make the cuts. Remember, the first 2 inches were marking cutter teeth. Now you use that to just get it started, just like that. And then I want to cut to this line. So maybe we can see it now better. And so I'm holding myself such that I'm cutting to that line like that. And I'll take it out and show it to you, because that one wasn't that good. I was a little off. But that's what you'll find when you go through this. I was a little out of balance. I sensed it when I was making the cut. So you practice these and practice and practice and practice. Do them 100 times. Do them 50 times. I don't care how many times you have to do it, but do it until you can cut straight lines like this, like that, and like that, over and over, because that's what you're going to be asked to do to make dovetails. So now we're going to go through the process of cutting a dovetail. I'm going to use these two boards, just cut on the opposite ends. Oops, it would help if I snapped it loose the right way. So the tail board and the pin board, okay? Just like they are down at the bottom. So what we're going to do is mark the tails first. And what we do to do that is with a marking gauge. So I want to mark the tail board the thickness of the pin board. So the way to do that is use this marking gauge, just let it be loose and then let the gauge fall right down to the board, and once it's on there, then just tighten it down. And so now you have that thickness exactly, and now you want to mark the tailboard. You want to mark the tailboard all the way around, okay? The way that's done is, this is the outside, so I'm going to do that lighter without as much pressure. I'm going to mark these, the sides, with quite a bit of pressure. And the side here with quite a bit of pressure. And then mark the inside with a lot of pressure. Okay, now, once I've got that set, then I want to use the tailboard. It may be different thickness, in this case they're the same, but I want to do the same thing with the pin board. And now I've measured this thickness, which I want to mark this board with. And what I'm going to do is just mark both the sides, I mean both these flat portions of the board, not the ends, because I don't need to mark the ends. Okay, so we've done that with the tails, and to make it more visible, I take a piece of tape, because I'm going to cut to those lines. Now I'll do that in just a minute after I mark them. Alright, I'll put the board in here, again, square it up, like that. And now I'm going to do the layout. And I'll do the layout with the dividers. And what I like to do is get the dividers set so I'm roughly 1/4 of an inch. I'll make it a little bit tighter. Roughly that amount to lay out on the ends. I'll give it a tweak a little bit. We'll make it a little bit tighter. So I come in from the end and I put a hole there. I come in from the end, I put a hole there. Now, I can lay this out with a ruler, but it takes longer. There's a much simpler way. Let's just say that I want to have two. How many tails did I have in the other board? I had 2 tails. I'll do the same here. So I'm going to just lay those out. So I have 2 tails. And first of all, I'm going to just space it so I can see how close I come. And I want a little bit more than that. So I go here, try it again, there, like that. That's a little bit more. So let's do this once more. That's about right. So now I come from here and I press down hard there. I go to the other end, I stick it in the hole there, and I come to here and I press down hard. Now, if you can see those marks, I'll make them more visible. That's how we can lay it out, and you can see what we've done. Now we'll mark them, okay? And we stick our, let's see, I'm going to do it so you can see it better. I'll stick my pen in the hole and mark all the way across. Stick my pen in the hole, move the marking block, mark all the way across. Stick a pen in the hole, mark all the way across. Do it on the other side. You can't see it, but it's just a repeat of what I just did. All right, so I've got those marks. Now I want to mark down to this line. And if you look at, well, you can't see it with that board. Anyway, now we're going to mark the tails off with this device. And since this is hardwood, I'm going to use 1 6. And so I put my pencil there, and then I move over to the line and move down to the mark. And do the same thing on over here and move down to the mark. And now I flip it around and put my pencil here and move down to the mark. And do it here and move to the mark and draw the line down. All right, now I've got those marks, and one is a little bit off, but I'll take that into account when I make the cuts. And now to ease the visualization, what I do is I just put a piece of tape precisely on that marked line. The reason being is I'm going to now saw these, and when I saw them, I want to stop just at the right location. Incidentally, this is a technique that you may find useful for a vise. This vise is not the most expensive. It's a good vise. It's from Rockler, but it's subject to racking. What do I mean by racking? Well, if I just had this board in, the board would push in here way too much and not hold this board uniformly. If I stick a device like this in at the opposite end and then put this in, then it's going to pull on both of those sides and not rack and keep this very uniform. All right, so now we got to cut on those lines. All right, and how's that light? Is that good? All right, so I put my thumb, get my stance just like this, put my thumb right there on the nail, and use that first several teeth to make that cut. And now what I'm going to do is cut down on that line. And now you can see that what I want to do is not cut through the tape. It's very difficult to see that line if you don't put tape there. And that's the first one. If you want to zoom in on that, you can see that that's a fairly good job. I cut that rather well. This one, I missed the mark. I'm going to cut it parallel to that line, but I'm going to cut to this mark on top. So that's really the one I want. All right, now cut. And cut down to that line. There, I like that one. Now we'll do the same thing over here. Because I'm cutting on that angle, let's keep the angle the same. down to the line. Good. Now one coming back. I think I better get my glasses out. Alright, that's right to the line. Alright, good. So, now the tails are cut. So I'm going to take this out. And now is where the method becomes very interesting. Now what I have to do is use those lines to cut, to be able to mark on the pin board where exactly to cut. So, set up a plane and move the plane so that it's flush right to the top. Okay. Now take another piece of tape. After I take the whiskers off here, I just use a chisel to remove those so they're more visible. Take the tape off the back, or the front rather, and I'm going to put another one on the back of this piece. And I'll explain why I'm doing that. I'm going to use that just as a reference. That's right on that line. So when I come over like that, I can feel it hit that tape, and that's just what I want. But now, like I say, the uniqueness of the method comes into play. What I want to do now with the marking gauge is measure the thickness of the kerf, of the saw kerf. And I do that by putting it down there, letting it drop to the wood, and then check to see how I did. I think I was underneath the saw at the time, so I'm going to do it again. That's the thickness. And if you can see that, that's exactly the thickness of that kerf. Why do I want that? Well, here's where the genius comes in. If I put this device right here so that that thickness is sticking above this board, and then I move my board in, I move it to the tape line, then I move it over. Guess what I have? I have a thickness right there that's equal to the thickness of the saw. So I'm going to do it again. I move that to here. I slide my board over, and I get it so it's just the thickness. Now, oops, I moved it. Get it again. All right, now I don't want to move it, because what I'm going to do now, I move this board to the left. That means I'm going to mark the tails on the right. And I'll do that by sliding this down and marking on the walnut tail board. And what am I creating? I'm creating the exact cut that I want to make on that board. I'm only going to do the ones on the right. And I do it 4 or 5 times make sure I've got a cut. This marking knife, incidentally, is the same thickness as the dovetail saw. All right, I moved the board. Anyway, I got those marks well. Now, what I do is I reverse the process. I put the thickness of the kerf down here, and I slide the board over to meet the top. All right, now we got that little thickness of the kerf. Now we did them on we moved the board to the right. Now we're going to cut to the left. Notice how I'm doing it. I'm sticking it down in and then pulling it all the way across. Sticking it in, pulling it across. Oops, I moved it. Moved it just slightly. Still got the rest. Still got that correct. Okay. You gotta make sure you don't move it. All right. Now we got the marks. You can see them. I'll highlight them a little bit with the saw. I'm gonna make this one. I'll make it with this to make sure like. There. Now they're more visible. There. Okay. Great. Now what we have to do is we have to cut down, straight down on those cut lines. And to make that easier, I'll mark them. And this time, I'm going to whip out my red pen so it's more visible. And they're going to, these lines are going to be cut straight down. So I move my pen there, go right down to the cut line. Move the pen to here, move it over. And here. All right. So they're much more visible that way. Okay? And again, use tape to lay on the mark so that I don't overcut them. All right? Good. Okay. Now we want to cut straight down, and this is where it's critical, because when these tails go in, they're going to go straight down just like I made those cuts. So I have to make sure they're straight here. Okay. So I'll start one. Some light on the subject. And now I want to go straight down that line. we'll do the same thing here. Get over there. No, not quite. There we go. Now we do this one. Okay, that one's good. Now we got one last one to cut. Great. Now is when the fret saw comes into play. I'll move this light so I can see a little better. All right, fret saw, very thin blade, and it's twisted so that when I move it like this, at that angle, it cuts horizontally. Almost forgot one of the most important things. When you're marking these boards, make sure you mark out the waste. This is the waste. This is what's going to be cut away on the tail board. And this is really important because I can't tell you how many times I've cut out the wrong. So that's the waste, okay? So now, as you can see, this board is going to fit like that. So now this becomes the waste. I'll use the other pen so you can see it. That's the waste. This is the waste. Okay, so waste goes to board, etc. Just like that. All right, now we use the fret saw to make the cuts. So this is the pin board, so we're going to slide this down like that. Get it down almost to the bottom. Make the turn. Make it go horizontal. Now when you get over here, you realize that you have to keep this at an angle, because you don't want to cut into the opposite side. That's that one. Do the same thing with this. And we're at an angle again. And that's cut. All right, so now the task is to chisel out the balance of the waste. Use another board for that. I don't like to do it on this board. And now we're going to move this light again so we can see what we're doing. Like that. I'm going to use a wider chisel. And this is where it gets interesting. because if you don't do this right, you end up ruining the piece. So what do I mean by doing it right? Here's what I mean. This chisel is going to have the bevel on this side and the straight part of the chisel. This is made flat or ground flat against here. If I go all the way in like that and try to take that whole chunk off, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail by virtue of cutting into this piece. And so I do it incrementally. I come about like that. You can probably see this better from the other side, Alex. You got to see this part on this side. I'm cutting just that piece of it. See where my chisel was? Just that little piece of it there off. Okay? All right, here we go. This lamp is not working. See, that just takes that little piece off just like that, which is what I want. I'll do the same thing over at this side. Try to get that end piece. All right. Now I'm going to go in exactly to the line. That's coming good. Alright, so that gets peeled away. Now I'll do the same thing with the other side. Helps to have a nice sharp chisel. I just sharpened these before doing this. See there, I almost cut in on the wrong side. You have to be very cautious with this. There we go. That's good. And now we'll cut. I'm going to whack that in a little bit. There we go. Now I cut right to that line. Great. Do the same thing over here. Cut right to that line. Good. So now we got that. I don't want to hammer all the way through, so now I go to the back side. And the line's probably not visible to the camera, but I can see where it is. But I'm basically doing the same thing. Cutting exactly on the line. And the same thing here. And now I cut all the way through. piece in that corner. Alright, I got a little piece right in there. Little piece in there. Looks pretty good. Alright, now we'll finish this side. When you're doing it with hardwoods, it takes a little bit more effort. Now we'll do it right to the line. That's good. Do it to the line on the other side. Flip it over and clean it up. Side. The other side. I've got a little cleanup to do. Notice I'm not touching any of these sides because they're supposed to be an exact cut. I got a little piece in there that I need to take out. Alright, so that one's clean. Alright, so that's the pen board. Finito, done, all finito. All right, let's do the tailboard. Now, again, we put it in rice, and we're going to use the fret saw to clean out. All right, now, the fret saw is only useful for this one. This one's, and this one we're going to cut with our dovetail saw. You can imagine how easy it is to cut out the wrong piece. That's like I say, I've had that wonderful experience. So, now let's cut. Again, I want it flat, parallel to this surface, the surface of the table. So I do it like that, and I come in here with my chisel, and I'm going to take out a little piece, just like that. And pop that out. Why am I doing that? Well, because that's the piece that gives me a good guideline to cut. So again, I want to be very straight, line up my saw. I'm cutting straight down that line. There's the edge of it. And there's that piece out. Right on the line, all the way through. You can see it right there. Do the same thing on this side. Take a chisel. Oh, that line, I didn't get the tape quite on that line right, but I'll make sure that I'm going right to the line. There's my line. There we are. All right, now, I like those. Look at that, right on the tape line. All right, now we just got to remove the waste from here on both sides. This requires a narrower chisel. And again, that chisel just fits in there. So I want to be careful about how I do this. Go right to the line. Okay. Alex, will you give me that narrow chisel from there?
This one?
Yeah, the narrowest one. Oh, I'm sorry, the one that's hanging looks like this. It's this one right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got it. I just need something a little narrower for this piece. In fact, that's too wide. I'll risk cutting into there where I don't want to. And now, right on the line. How do we do here? We got a little bit cut out. That looks good. Now we're ready to, almost ready to put the boards together. And we are going to have the outsides of the boards where the boards are marked. The insides of the boards are what we want to do a little trim on now. So I flip it over, I take a wider chisel, I don't start at the end, I start in a little bit, and I just take off a little piece of board like that just to get it started. get it started to slide together. And do that all the way around here. And then take those pieces off. All right. Those marks will help this slide together. So, take the tape off, put the boards together the way they belong, and now you see the result. Did we do it or didn't we do it? Well, here we go. It's a little tight. Just a tad tight. So I think I'm going to have to trim just a little off this board. Let's see. Still a little tight. Takes a little bit of trim. Usually I don't have to do this. So I must have moved the board or something because I shouldn't have to do any of that work. We'll try it again. That is a very tight fit. It's a very tight fit. But it's a good fit. Well, that's one of the tighter fits I've had, but you can see that's not bad. Take that tape off. And that's cutting dovetails. Now, what we do next, put it in the vise, and put our little 3/4 spacer in there, and clamp it in. I think that board is up just a little bit. I might be off. Let me put a spacer in there for some reason. Make this work a little bit better. Get out one of my planes. And now I'm just going to trim this down. Back this off. Take it in a little bit. it over, do the same thing on the opposite side. Let's say for square here. Yeah, down just a little bit. That's better. All right. Sometimes a different kind of plane works better to trim this up. There we go. And that's it. Nice and smooth surface. A little bit of roughness there that I need to plane out, but basically that's hand-cut dovetails. Not a bad fit up.